Hi there, I'm Project61, and in this video I'm going to show you how I made this sound. This is a grimy, slimy, nasty bass which I call Slaughterhauz that's perfect for heavy dubstep and hybrid trap. I made this sound using one of the wavetables from Cymatics Animals for Serum pack. I used the demo version of the pack to make this sound, and there's going to be a link in the description to a free download of this patch. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's dive right into the sound. So the first thing I did was open up an instance of Serum and go to oscillator A. I clicked on the drop down menu and picked the pick to wavetable from the Cymatics Animals Wavetables demo. I turned the unison up to 2, turned the detune down, turned the wavetable position to 68, turned the warp down, and went to the warp menu and picked the mirror option. I went to the filter, turned it on, and then I went to the drop down menu and picked HP12 from the multi menu. Turned the cutoff up to 61 Hz, turned the resonance to 38%, and turned the frequency to 83%. Next, I went to LFO1, turned the mode to trigger, turned on the triplets and the dots, and turned the rate to bar T. Then I made this LFO shape, and feel free to make your own, by the way. One tip I have is to play around with the LFO shapes and see what you get. If you need some ideas or if you want something that you can just pick and choose and toss it in, which is great for demoing new sounds, by the way, then I highly recommend getting this pack called 50 Serum LFO Shapes by Cymatics. You can get it from their website for free, and I'll give you guys the link to save you the trouble. I applied LFO1 to the detune at 34 and the wavetable position at 26 on oscillator A. Then I applied it to the cutoff at 33 and the frequency at negative 36 on the filter. I went to LFO2, turned the mode off, turned the rate to bar, and made this shape. I then applied LFO2 to the warp knob on oscillator A all the way to 100. I went to the effects tab and turned on the hyper dimension. On the hyper, I turned the rate to 16%, turned the detune to 25%, and turned the mix down to 3%. On the dimension, I turned the size to 48% and turned the mix down to 2%. It's important that you turn the dimension down like this because you don't want it to clutter up the sound. I added more character and crunchiness to the sound by turning on the distortion. I turned the drive to 83%, turned the mix down to 14%, and applied LFO1 to the drive knob all the way up. I turned on the compression and turned it into a multiband compressor. I then turned the threshold to negative 15 decibels, turned the ratio to 2 to 1, turned the attack down to 109.4 milliseconds, turned the release up to 395.3 milliseconds, and turned the gain up to 8.3 decibels. I turned on the reverb, turned the size down to 25%, turned the low cut up to 8%, turned the high cut up to 59%, and turned the mix down to 5%. Next, I turned on the EQ and added a more vowely sound to the patch. For the first band, I turned the low EQ type to L, turned the frequency to 91 Hz, turned the Q to 49%, and turned the gain up to 8.8 decibels. For the second band, I turned the high Q type to H, turned the frequency to 7630 Hz, turned the Q to 50%, and turned the gain up to 9.5 decibels. I applied the LFO1 to the low EQ frequency knob at 47 and then applied it to the high EQ frequency at negative 53. I turned on the filter, went to the drop down menu and picked band reject from the mix menu, turn the cutoff all the way down, turn the resonance to 4%, turn the drive up to 3%, turn the width all the way down, and turn the mix all the way up. I applied LFO1 to the cutoff at 44 and then applied it to the width at 46. Next, I turned on the master tune, which gave this bass a pitched sort of sound. So I went to the matrix tab, set the source to LFO3, set the destination to master tune, turned the type to bipolar, and turned the mod matrix to 5. Then I set the rate of LFO3 to bar and set the shape to this. I went back to the oscillator tab and turned on the sub. I turned the level down to 28%, applied LFO1 to it at 48, and turned on direct out. The reason I turned on direct out is so the filter and effects is bypassed for the sub, which allowed me to be able to mix the sub separately. After I did all of this, I routed LFO4 to the rate of LFO1. This allowed me to control the rate of LFO1 by setting up the LFO rate control. The area where you set up your LFO shape in LFO4 at different intervals. This is an advanced technique that adds complexity to the patch, and this is particularly useful if you don't want to manually control the LFO rate. This is an optional step, and you don't need to do this if you want to control the rate manually. This bass will still sound great without it. You can always manually control the rate of LFO1 by applying a macro to it. So I went to the matrix tab, set the source to LFO4, set the destination to LFO1 rate, set the type to bipolar, and set the amount to 61. In the LFO4 tab, I set the rate to bar. Then I set the LFO shape. You can set up the LFO shape to whatever you want. Just play around until you get something you like. Just remember that you're setting up this LFO to control the rate of LFO1. A little trick you can do in order to make things go quicker and not wear yourself out setting up this LFO is to hit the shift button and then click on the grid. Make sure you do this every time you adjust it. So after I finished the Serum patch, I moved on to the external effects, which really brought this bass to life. So the first thing I did was insert an audio effects track into the audio effects area of the device chain. Then I inserted two EQ8s into the chain list of the audio effects track, named the top one bass and the bottom one sub. I went to the bass tab, clicked on the first band, turned it into a tight low cut, turned the frequency to 168 Hz, and turned the resonance, that's the Q knob, to 1.65. The second band, I changed the frequency to 200 Hz and kept the resonance at 0.71. For the third band, I turned the frequency to 3052 Hz, turned the gain to 6.90 decibels, and turned the resonance to 0.48. And finally, I brought out the high harmonics some more by clicking on the fourth band, turning it into a high shelf, turning the frequency to 7072 Hz, turning the gain to 3.81 decibels, and turned the resonance to 1.5. Next, I worked on bringing out the sub bass. I disabled the second and third bands, clicked on the first band, turned the frequency down all the way to 43.3 Hz and the resonance to 0.85. Next, I clicked the fourth band and turned it into a tight high cut. I turned the frequency knob to 208 Hz and turned the resonance knob to 2.70. I put a separate EQ for the sub because it makes mixing the sub easier and is something that I recommend for you guys to do as well. Next, I gave the sub a little more grit by adding a saturator to the audio effects chain next to the EQ for the sub and turned up the drive to 5.71 decibels. I found that the sub sounded much grittier after I added it and stood out in the mix a little bit better and added more character to the sub. I added another saturator, although I added it outside the audio effects chains this time around and turned up the drive to 8.57 decibels. I added an OTT next, which you can find under the multi-band dynamics label in order to further beef up the sounds, and I started by adjusting the low end, then I adjusted the mid end, and then finally I adjusted the high end. Next, I added an isotope ozone 7 exciter to add even more character to the sound. For the low end, I turned the amount to 1.2 and the mix to 13.5%. For the low mids, I turned the amount down to 2.5. For the high mids, I turned the amount down to 2.1 and the mix to 74.5%. And finally, I turned down the amount for the high end all the way down to 1.1 and the mix to 10.6%. For basses, it's best to keep the amount for all the frequencies under 4. Any more than that and your bass will sound muddy. And finally, to cap it all off, I added a limiter because the volume was going over the limit after I added all those effects. But you don't need to do this. You can just turn down the volume in the Serum patch. And that's it. I really love how this sound came out and I hope you do too. And feel free to give this video a thumbs up if you did. Feel free to play around with it and include it in your own music. And feel free to let me know if you do so I can go and check out whatever song it is you used it on. I'll go ahead and provide you guys with a zip file download in the description that'll contain two Serum patches of this patch. One with the routing of LFO4 to LFO1 and the other without and instead provides a macro set to modulate the rate of LFO1 manually. I'll also provide two audio effect racks for this patch so you can use it if you use Ableton. The first one will have Ozone 7 and the second one won't for people that don't have Ozone 7. Think of all of this as notes you can pull out at a later time to refer to. And of course, you can also feel free to use this effect rack on your own productions. If you want to see more stuff like this, then make sure to subscribe to this channel. There will be more tutorials coming up and this is just the beginning, so stay tuned. Thank you for watching and I'll see you all later.